The India in which Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi had been born into the merchant class in 1869 was as divided into castes as the soil is layered. In the top stratum were the Maharajas and the princes, who, despite their wealth and power, still had to bow to the might of the White Raj. And at the pinnacle of that pyramid sat Queen Victoria, the monarch on whose empire the sun never set. On state occasions in London, the Indian cavalry was a reminder of the exotic subcontinent across the world, helping to protect their ultimate ruler, but at the same time acknowledging their fealty to the throne and dependence on Mother England. However, an occasional shadow passed over that comfortably established state of affairs. This magnificent Durbar in 1911 for the new king, George V, was followed the next year by another levee, celebrating the consecration of Delhi as the new capital of India. At that, a bomb was thrown at the Governor-General, Lord Hardinge. It wounded him and killed an aide. It seemed that there were extremists who did not want to be part of the British Empire and who did not join in giving it 3 cheers. When the 19-year-old Gandhi came to London to study law in 1888, he was keen to become as English as possible. He had a suit made in Bond Street and took lessons in ballroom dancing. However, he soon fell among radicals, attracted to them because they shared his rejection of eating flesh. He became a member of the Council of the Vegetarian Society and met politicians. Like these soldiers embarking for the Boer War, he went to South Africa, where he had been offered a legal post among Indians there. He stayed for 21 years, working for their equality. In the war against the Boers, he supported the British. He felt that Indians who claimed citizenship of a country were duty-bound to defend it. So he raised an ambulance corps and was decorated for it. Then he forced General Smuts to give Indians many rights they had been denied. When he returned to India in 1915, Smuts wrote, "The saint has left our shores, I hope forever." Gandhi found the British Raj in India as repressive as the South Africans and became convinced that India had to win its independence. Nevertheless, when the German army marched into Belgium, bringing Britain into the First World War, Gandhi sided with his country's masters and rallied Indians to assist the British war effort, although it meant accepting the status quo. He even recruited soldiers for the British Indian Army, but at the same time, he announced his total opposition to British rule of India. Gandhi had married his wife, Kastubai, when they were both just 13 years old, as was the custom. Now, with her support, he began the fasts which were to make him world famous. On the 2nd of April, 1921, Lord Reading arrived in India as Viceroy. He had absolute power over the police and the army. Gandhi had become equally undisputed ruler of the Congress Party, which demanded independence. While Reading was determined to keep the pleasures and the privileges of the Raj intact, he proposed a meeting between them. Some of the Mahatma's followers objected. Gandhi's answer was, "We may attack measures and systems, but we must not attack men. Imperfect ourselves, we must be tender towards others." They had 13 hours of conversations, in which Gandhi baffled Reading by his insistence that non-violence and love would succeed in winning India its independence. The Mahatma said that his major task was to purify India. Britain's expulsion would be a byproduct. Reading regarded an outbreak of trouble on the northwest frontier as Gandhi's work. 2 platoons of a native regiment of the Indian Army had refused to go to Peshawar to shoot their unarmed brethren, and the spectre of another mutiny, a repetition of the bloody uprising of 1857, haunted Reading. He considered arresting the Mahatma. A visit by the Prince of Wales in November 1921 made up his mind, as Gandhi used the opportunity to draw attention to his campaign against one of the economic injustices of the Raj, the import of foreign cloth. While crowds were cheering the prince in Bombay, he set off a bonfire of imported cloth and clothes. The police opened fire, and there were dead and wounded on both sides. On the 10th of March 1922, Gandhi was arrested for sedition. He pleaded guilty and said he would submit cheerfully to the highest penalty. He was sentenced to 6 years, but after his wife led a vigil when he had appendicitis, he was released in less than 2. Gandhi was arrested again in 1930 when he deliberately broke the salt laws. These made it a crime to possess salt not bought from the government. Gandhi called it a nefarious monopoly, salt being as essential as water to man and beast. He led hundreds of followers on a 200-mile march to the sea. It took them 24 days. Early in the morning of the 6th of April, he picked up some salt left by the waves. It was later sold to the highest bidder for 1,600 rupees. Within days, hundreds of thousands of Indians were making their own salt. This resulted in more than 60,000 people being imprisoned, and there were fatal riots. Over 2,000 of his followers, protesting at a salt works, allowed themselves to be clubbed down without protest in a show of non-violence. When his followers continued defying the authorities and made their own salt, Gandhi was arrested on the 5th of May. 9 months later, when he was needed at a round-table conference in London, he was released. He arrived in England triumphant. Questioned about his dress, he replied, "You wear +4s, I wear -4s." When he had tea with the king and queen, he wore his usual loincloth. Afterwards, he said, the king had enough on for both of us. He stayed in an East End settlement house because, he said, he preferred living among his own kind.
It has been a matter of the greatest pleasure to me to be in the midst of the poor people of the East End of London. Whatever the result of the mission that brought me to London, I know that I shall carry with me the pleasantest memories of my stay in the midst of the poor people of East London.
But the conference itself was a deep disappointment to him, as it merely intensified the divisions between the various Indian minorities.
My speeches at the Round Table Conference have been all officially reported. Call that as you like. It is complete independence that we want.
He went home via France and Italy, where he continued to spread his message of non-violence. He refused hospitality from Mussolini and spent only 10 minutes with him. However, he was tactful about the young fascisti who paraded for him with their guns.
It has given me very great pleasure to see all these young children hale and hearty. Quite enough. Thank you very much.
Back in India, he found that the Viceroy, Lord Willingdon, had unleashed the sternest repression in the history of the struggle for independence. Arrested again, he began another fast, this time for basic rights for the untouchables, members of the lowest Hindu caste, whom he called the Children of God. 5 days into his fast unto death, the laws against the untouchables were modified. Although he was still held in prison, he slowly regained his health, but he had powerful enemies at home and abroad. Winston Churchill said he was revolted by the spectacle of this seditious fakir striding half-naked up the steps of the Viceroy's palace to negotiate on equal terms with the representative of the King Emperor. In 1934, released from prison but upset by what he regarded as opportunism by his followers, Gandhi retired from public life. He lived in an ashram, emphasizing spiritual rewards and reducing material wants to a minimum. He even weaved his own loincloth. He said that India must be rebuilt from below. To Pandit Nehru, who had been his lieutenant for 16 years, fell the task of turning his master's idealism into practical politics. Western educated, with grace and charm, he could be obstinate and bitter. It was his destiny to bring independence, despite Gandhi's opposition to his methods. A new viceroy, Lord Linlithgow, arrived in 1936. Behind the pomp of the old British Raj, Nehru was working for a new order to be established. The first goal was self-governing dominion status. Then came the Second World War. This suddenly speeded up the process. While Gandhi threw his weight for Britain and against Hitler, the fall of France encouraged those who saw India's future in a British defeat. But as the Battle of Britain raged, Gandhi told them, "We do not seek independence out of Britain's ruin." Now Britain promised dominion status, but not until after the war. With Pearl Harbor, everything changed again. Suddenly the war was on India's own doorstep. While the Congress Party came out strongly against the Axis, one of Gandhi's former lieutenants, Subhas Chandra Bose, embarrassed him by fleeing the country and, when Singapore fell, raising an Indian national army from captured Indian troops to fight for Japan. The sight of Asians triumphant over Westerners also encouraged demands for independence. India now became a base for hostilities, as well as a vital supply link. Southeast Asia Command was established in Delhi, and it did not have enough trains to keep its forces in Burma fully supplied. So, during 1942, famine came to Bengal. The province had depended on Burma for its rice, and the army lacked rolling stock for replacement food. As many as 3 million people and countless animals may have starved to death. With pressure for independence increasing, Sir Stafford Cripps was sent with new proposals. He offered a constituent assembly and the ultimate right to leave the Commonwealth. But Gandhi wanted immediate dominion status, and Cripps left empty-handed. He blamed Gandhi. Cripps knew that most Congress leaders wanted to accept, if only to preempt the fast-rising Muslim League.
We want to see India a free, self-governing nation, free from the Japanese, free from all domination, side by side with us as a great power exercising her influence in the formation of that peace which we hope will lay new foundations of happiness for world civilization. That was the object of our scheme. That is still our object.
Despite unrest in many cities, which led to the army being deployed, the only sign of a real enemy on Indian soil were the Hurs of Sindh, north of Hyderabad. These bandits were praised by German and Japanese propaganda for their sabotage activities, and the Indian army used them to practice dropping paratroops on a hostile force in the jungle. Gandhi was imprisoned again on the 9th of August 1942. With the failure of the Cripps mission, he had adopted a new, uncompromising slogan addressed to the British: "Quit India." His followers were due to start a mass civil disobedience campaign when the police in Bombay swooped and arrested him and 50 other Congress leaders. The whole working committee was interned in Pune. Widespread protests resulted in £1 million worth of damage. At least 1,000 protesters and police were killed in the violence. 250 railway stations were destroyed, among damage to government property. Martial law again brought troops onto the streets. In the midst of this internal fighting, a new viceroy arrived in October 1943. It was Field Marshal Lord Wavell, who had distinguished himself in the North African campaign, but had done less well in Southeast Asia. Now, demonstrably a civilian, his task was to save India from itself. He began by sending troops to feed the starving millions in Bengal. He went to Calcutta himself and announced that food control was his first concern. The famine was now compounded by a widespread drought. Wavell imposed rationing in all the big cities. He put his troops to distributing food and ensuring that it was fairly shared. Never had the British Army been so popular in India. The end of the war in Europe brought a new urgency to the question of India's future. When it was followed only 3 months later by the surrender of Japan, the pressure for change was overwhelming. Between the two celebrations, the Labour Party had defeated Gandhi's old enemy, Winston Churchill, in a general election, and was much more sympathetic to allowing the subcontinent its freedom. Wavell called a conference at Simla and released the Congress leaders from jail to attend it. Gandhi came. He was by now an almost mythical figure, worshipped as a demigod, to his own embarrassment. He was now within sight of his lifelong quest for an independent India. His successor, the mercurial Pandit Nehru, handled the day-to-day negotiations. But now there was a new player at the table, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, tall, impeccable, and Muslim. He was determined that the Muslims would have their own country, Pakistan, and opposed Hindu demands for a single India at the subsequent London conference. Nehru himself was wavering, but Gandhi was unyielding. Jinnah believed that time was on his side and did not yet insist on partition. He went to Downing Street to tell the Prime Minister, Clement Attlee, that he would be reasonable as long as the Hindu Congress Party was as well. All this political maneuvering was anathema to Wavell, a soldier and poet, and Attlee replaced him. His choice as replacement was a stroke of genius. It was Admiral Lord Louis Mountbatten, uncle to the present Queen, and a lover of India. One of his first acts on arrival in India was to take his wife to call on Gandhi. But despite mutual goodwill, he failed in an attempt to get agreement to any plan for partition. There had already been bloodshed, and the Mahatma foresaw much more blood flowing if partition were adopted. But the alternative was equally dangerous. In July 1946, the All India Muslim League had withdrawn its agreement to a federated state and reverted to a demand for a completely separate country of its own. Jinnah had threatened, "If you want war, we accept it." He had called a day of direct action for the 16th of August. There were only a few British troops in Bengal. More than 3,000 people were killed by rioters in Calcutta, and the local Muslim League government was unable or unwilling to control them until British reinforcements arrived. Bengal was cut off from the rest of the country. Lack of food added to the crisis in the hospitals, which were overwhelmed by 10,000 casualties, mostly Hindus. Gandhi called on the governor, Sir Frederick Burrows, on a visit to Calcutta to try and stem the violence, and one of his most effective fasts was temporarily successful. But the Hindus in Bihar turned on the Muslim minority there in retaliation. As Nehru gradually came to reject Gandhi's views and agreed to 2 separate nations, there were other outbreaks of horrific violence in East Bengal and the United Provinces. With independence, the country was split, and split again, with Pakistan in 2 parts. Mountbatten himself became Governor-General of the part called India, with Nehru as Prime Minister, and Jinnah became Governor-General of the Pakistan sections. But there were problems. At first, the Maharajas, like the ruler of Puri, threatened to refuse to join an independent Indian state. Religious tensions were also extreme. On Independence Day, Gandhi was in Calcutta, where riots were expected. But so powerful was his personality that traditional enemies embraced, shouting, "Long live Gandhi, long live Hindu-Muslim unity." It did not live longer than overnight. Soon the whole subcontinent was in flames. Hindus and Sikhs fled from Pakistan and from what had been Bengal, while Muslims trekked in the opposite directions. 12 million people took part in the greatest migration in history. Soldiers did what they could to intercept marauding bands, here of Sikhs, but before the year was out, 500,000 people had died. Bullock cart convoys were frequently waylaid. Villages were razed to the ground. Refugee camps were breeding grounds of disease and death, and floods added a potent natural hazard. The few who could get a motorized lift were the lucky ones. Refugee trains were held up, and most of their passengers slaughtered. The roads were choked with refugees who passed each other in hostility. Some of the worst scenes were in Delhi, and Gandhi decided to go and fast there. Whenever he fasted, he was able to force a halt in the Holocaust, but he was in despair at his lack of long-term influence. On his 78th birthday, he asked for condolences, not congratulations. His fast succeeded in gaining the rightful compensation for the Muslims that had been promised them on partition, but withheld by the new Indian government. This led directly to his death, as it infuriated a group of the more fanatical Hindus, who regarded his demand as treachery. They plotted to kill him, and went to Delhi for the purpose in January 1948. They found him recovering from his fast. There was a temporary peace in the troubled city, as no other activists on either side wanted the responsibility of causing his death. As the Mahatma walked to prayer that 30th of January, he was shot. His murderer and accomplice were hanged, contrary to Gandhi's teachings. Of an earlier would-be assassin, he had said, "You should pity him. I wish all evildoers well."
Join us for another Great Crimes and Trials double at the same time tomorrow. Next, an ex-New York detective and a private eye reopened the case of Stuart Heaton, who was convicted of stabbing a 16-year-old 81 times. He got life, but did the cops get the wrong man? And if they did, where's the real killer now? Crime Stories, after the break.